You don't have to live with this pain that you've been living with for so long. And there is help out there. So you're not alone. There is help and it's going to be okay.
Hello and welcome to the Jean Hales podcast. I'm your host, Shelley Ware. Today I'll be interviewing women's health physio Heba Shahid. Now, I'll be honest, before this interview I had no idea that women's health physios existed, let alone what they did. Now, it turns out they can help with a bunch of things either we were too embarrassed to ask about or thought could never be fixed, like weeing yourself when you sneeze, painful sex, constipation, period pain, and endometriosis, and lots more. I've endured pelvic pain my whole life, so I was amazed and excited to hear Heba's insights and how she can treat women like me. I hope you enjoy my interview with Heba Shahid. So Heba, you're a women's health physio, and I used to think that physios were just about fixing a back or a bit of a dodgy knee and all the kind of problems that affect all genders. But what kind of problem does a women's health physio fix?
A women's health physio fixes things that are related to female health. So anything to do with the bladder, such as bladder pain syndrome or urinary incontinence or overactive bladder. Women's health physios also help with things to do with the bowel, such as constipation, things to do with menstrual health, such as period pain, things to do with sexual health, such as pain with sex. So it's a very wide variety of things. So if I was to sum it all up, women's health physios address anything to do with the bladder, anything to do with the bowels, anything to do with menstrual health, anything to do with sexual health. One of the biggest things that women's health physios work with is the pelvic floor, because that is the group of muscles that supports your bladder, your uterus, and your bowels.
Wow, I didn't realise that was all fixable by actually going to a physio. Really, the only thing I've ever heard about around the pelvic floor muscles is to do pelvic floor exercises while you're doing something else. You know, it seems to be this flippant thing that we're told to do. They clearly are very important.
The pelvic floor exercises are super important, but they're not something that should be given to every single woman, because sometimes women have pelvic floors that are too tight. And when they're too tight and you're giving them Kegels or pelvic floor exercises to do, you can actually make their symptoms worse. So that's why it's really important for women to see a women's health physiotherapist, because that physiotherapist can inform the woman if she has a pelvic floor that's weak or a pelvic floor that's tight or a pelvic floor that doesn't coordinate well, or a combination of them. And from that, give her very specific exercises that's relevant to her dysfunction. So yes, pelvic floor exercises are important. However, it's even more important to get individualized pelvic floor exercises.
Consider my mind completely blown here. How did you become interested in this area of medicine?
I became interested in women's health physiotherapy from my own personal experience with a lot of issues around the pelvic floor. So I have had a long history of constipation growing up. I had a long history of urge-related incontinence in my teens and in my 20s. And then when I got married, I had a lot of issues with sexual pain. And pretty much from my teens all the way up until I was in my mid-20s, I had severe period pain. So in my own journey to heal myself, I stumbled across the pelvic floor and discovered that everything was related.
Yeah.
And for me, the biggest thing was that my pelvic floor was way too tight and it was making me constipated and it was making me incontinent and it was making me have pain, lots and lots and lots of pain. And so when I started working on the pelvic floor, having it released and being taught how it should actually work, coordinating properly with the rest of my muscles, I was able to alleviate all of my symptoms. Today, I have no pelvic floor symptoms, no period pain, no sexual pain, no loss of bladder control. My bowels are amazing. So it was a journey for my own healing, but also I love helping other women and I love serving the community. So they just kind of married each other, I guess. And here I am today, still teaching pelvic floor women's health 12 years on.
I feel like you've just come here for myself, to be perfectly honest. I don't know about the rest of you listening, but I feel like this is the angels and the gods saying, "Hey, you and I, we need to hook up and have a bit of a chat." I'm thrilled that there is some help for things that I've spent the last 50 years suffering through that I didn't know could be fixed, to be perfectly honest with you. So I feel really blessed to be talking to you. So how long did it actually take with the physio? Was it a long process over years, or was it a short, quick fix? How long did it take?
For me, it was a long process because I did have a long history of issues. However, in saying that, I was on a journey trying to find out what was my issue for a long time, and it was hard to find. Therapists that could help me and that knew what was going on with me. So generally, in terms of women's health physiotherapy, it depends on the woman. Like sometimes it can go on for a little bit longer, especially if, her muscles are stubborn or she's not doing her exercise or something like that. It just depends on the woman.
I wanted to get an example from you on what treatment with a women's health physio is like. Now, honestly, there are so many issues that you've brought up that affect me, but let's pick one. Sometimes I have to cross my legs when I sneeze, well, in case something comes out. But I think that is what you call urinary incontinence. Can you tell me what urinary incontinence is? And if I came to see you, how would we go about fixing it?
Urinary incontinence is when women lose control of their bladder from things like coughing, sneezing, laughing, jumping, running, or if they're really busting to go to the bathroom to empty their bladder and accidentally lose control. So if you were to come to see me in my clinic, the first thing that would usually happen is a long history, like to find out why you're having those bladder accidents. Could it have been from your childbirth? Could it have been from an injury? Whatever that might be. And then usually after that, there would be a women's health assessment, which usually involves a vaginal exam. So that's where we would actually check what's happening in your pelvic floor, and that's only accessible through your vagina. We would check for whether your pelvic floor is weak, whether it's tight, whether you're having troubles with engaging your pelvic floor in the right order of muscles, so it's coordinating properly with the rest of your muscle. And usually with someone who has an issue with what we call stress incontinence, which is what you're mentioning, it's usually a problem with coordination of the pelvic floor, that the pelvic floor muscles aren't coming on just before that cough or just before that sneeze. Instead, they're letting go, and that's why you're losing control. And how would we fix these things? There's quite a few different things that we do, but it's usually targeted around supporting anything that's dysfunctional and exercise-based things, as well as a lot of advice around healthy bladder and bowel habits.
That's good to know. I like that a lot. So why do you think there's so much shame around these kinds of issues?
I suppose it's just, the history of women problems always being swept under the rug. There's a lot of taboo around even speaking about genital areas. There's a lot of cultural sort of stigmas associated with that region, anything to do with women's health. And I think as well in the past, a lot of gynecologists or anyone who treated female health concerns were males. Today, it's getting better. We are seeing more female obstetrician gynecologists, more female health therapists. But in the past, it was a male-dominated field. And so, there's that lack of understanding and compassion and empathy where we just need to, fix this woman who has some kind of, female health issue, but it's so surgical or it's so detached. The shame is kind of there's a cultural element, there's an element of not having female therapists to begin with or female doctors to begin with. And each kind of community has their own stigmas associated with that area. It's something that we don't talk about. It's not breakfast conversation, as a lot of, TV likes to say. So it's just not a conversation we have.
With the cultural issues, I'm Aboriginal and we certainly have some hesitancy in talking about these issues. And you being Muslim, I know within your community as well. How do you break through those cultural barriers for women to seek help and get what they need?
Personally, I felt like even the knowledge wasn't out there. So the first thing that I felt I really needed to do was just start advocating about women's health and pelvic floor issues. Just start talking about it with confidence. Not be embarrassed myself when I speak about it. Just say the words vagina, periods, sex. Say it so bluntly that it's like just normal conversation coming out of my mouth. So the first thing I did was I started this platform called The Pelvic Expert, which is social media advocation around women's health issues. And so I will talk about it on Facebook, on Instagram, and make videos, make posts, stories, all sorts of things to just make it like they hear it over and over and over again, me talking about pelvic floor, that they know that, okay, it's not something I really need to be embarrassed about. This is actually something that I can fix. So I feel like the first thing is just that awareness that it's okay to go and seek help to begin with, and that these issues that they're facing are not normal. They're not something that they have to live with. And it's not just cultural barriers in my community as a Muslim woman or as an Indian woman or as an Australian woman or whatever it might be. It's not even just those cultural barriers. It's gender barriers as well. And it's socioeconomic barriers. There's so many different barriers that are stopping women from seeking help. So the first thing is advocacy and increasing awareness and providing education in a confident way that's direct and blunt, and that it's okay to talk about it. And then from there, just slowly creating conversations. So like running workshops and running live webinars. So there's an opportunity for women to actually engage, and then pushing for them to seek out help. So I feel like because there's some shame, but also some embarrassment, like no one should touch that area. Sometimes as soon as you mention that women's health physios do vaginal exams, there's this kind of shock horror thing of anyone touching that area. A lot of women haven't even looked at their own vaginas themselves. They don't let their partners look at their vaginas. Sometimes the first interaction of someone touching it is their partner or in birth.
Yeah.
So a lot of that is just creating that comfortability around talking about it, and then that comfortability around touching it and looking at it yourself. And then from there, feeling comfortable to see a women's health physio who is going to do a vaginal exam.
Couldn't agree more with every single word that you said. And I think for me today, speaking with you, I didn't know that this was a possibility for me to get this kind of help. And I feel like I've been really immersed within women's health for a really long time. And I've had endometriosis, I've had trouble with having birth, I've had all of these pelvic pain, I've had terrible things going on. But not once has a women's health physio been spoken to me about. So I feel really, really privileged to be able to hear what you do and how you can help women. And I'm sure that this is going to help so many other women. There are some tricky things though, waiting lists, getting onto people like yourself with the skill. What are there things that people can do in the meantime while waiting to see a physio that might help them?
I want women to remember that it doesn't matter how long it's been that they've had these issues. They can seek help at any time. And if there is long waiting lists, that's okay. In terms of what women can do while they wait, just start getting educated. Learn about your pelvic floor. Start to get more familiar with your pelvic floor, not just from an education point of view, but even from a touch point of view. Know where your clitoris is. Know where your vagina is. And then the other thing is understanding, if you do have pain, that when you do understand your pain, it reduces your pain. So a lot of the time when we have pain issues, we catastrophize because we don't know what's wrong and that we can get help. But once you understand that, you know what, there are people out there that can help me, it helps your nervous system and your body to relax. And you know that the appointment is coming up, and then I will slowly start my healing journey, and it might take a while, but I will get better. So feeding in those positive messages into your body and your brain and your nervous system that you can be healed, that you can be pain-free. But in the meantime, just get educated.
This has been fantastic, but I want to know, what advice would you give your younger self?
The main advice that I would give my younger self is it's going to be okay. You don't have to live with this pain that you've been living with for so long. And there is help out there. Find a women's health physio, find a pelvic floor physio, because they're the ones that can help you with your issues. You're not some weird person that has all these problems and you're 15, 16. A lot of people have this issue as well. So you're not alone. There is help and it's going to be okay.
Well, it has been an absolute pleasure. And thank you for sharing your skills, your gifts and your heart with us today. We feel very, very, very honoured. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley, for having me. It's my honour.
That was seriously amazing, a truly mind-blowing discussion from beginning to end. You can find more information about all the pelvic floor conditions we've talked about today on the Jean Hales website, jeanhales.org.au. If you want to find a pelvic floor physio in your area, a great place to start is the Australian Physiotherapy Association's website, choose.physio. And if you want to know more about today's guest, Heba Shahid, we've put links to all her social media in the episode description, or you can go to the website she founded, thepelvicexpert.com. And we'll catch you next time.